and it was played on two fronts. It was played on the front of the person who was carrying out the search, and on that front we were conditioned for a long period of time to think in terms of keywords and hit and miss combinations of words. And it was also played on the front of the person, on the part of the person who was actually creating content. So what used to happen if you wanted, for instance, to find, let's say, my favorite usually query is finding a pizza restaurant, you would have had to put down pizza restaurant plus your location plus perhaps the town. And then you would have had to have hoped that the page which would have come up would have been optimized for that location. Now, the person who was usually in charge of optimizing the page would have tried in his turn to guess what kind of keywords he used. And all this was an escalating game, because a page that was optimized was not enough to be optimized once. It had to continually being optimized and kept optimized by continually refreshing the keywords, getting more backlinks to that, creating more and more content which had specific keyword structures, and so on and so on. It was a losing proposition. It was a losing proposition because we were creating data that was essentially empty. It didn't mean very much, and it didn't deliver the value that was actually intended to deliver. So the result of that was that as the web grew and grew and grew in terms of data, then we basically got into a stage where we needed something else. We needed something a bit more precise. And this is where semantic search comes in. So in a word, the transition from the old search of the past, which was Boolean search, to semantic search is a transition from a state of uncertainty in the information which we find into a state of certainty, with all that that implies. It sounds a bit like paradise. I can guarantee you it's not, because right now we're in a gray zone, which is a half and half world. The reason we're in the gray zone is because semantic search is governed by that certainty factor, which means that the results which need to come up every time a search query is put on the web have to have a high confidence factor from the point of view of the search engine. In this particular case, Google. In order for Google to generate a high confidence factor in a particular website or a particular result, an enormous amount of data has to be computed, has to be checked, and then it has to be classified. It takes a long time. It's not always easy to do. It has a certain amount of inconsistency in the approach at the moment, and it produces some results which are easy to verify and present, and some results which are not. What happens right now in search is that if there are gaps in the semantic index, they're filled by the results of the old Boolean index. And sometimes you will see that the result of this approach gives better answers in the first 1 to 5 perhaps queries which come up, answers which come up in response to a search query on the web, but the rest have actually degraded in terms of the quality. So how do we address all this now? This is the million-dollar question, because things have changed, and have changed drastically. Quantifying the change, Google itself said that essentially it's a transition from a web made of websites to a web made of people, from strings to things. And what this implies is that the uncertainty factors of the past, which governed our behavior when it came to content on the web, when it came to creating search and search verticals and search queries, and of course content intending to surface in search, are now governed by entirely different mindsets. And this is really difficult to actually understand at a business level, because websites still deliver information, web pages still used to deliver content, and content still has to be generated. What has really changed, what the mindset shift now entails, is the fact that the content which we create now is intended to answer specific questions rather than fill search queries. And the two things sound similar, but they're not. They're actually really different. A search query is a statistical kind of question, whereas a question actually means something which has a real intent behind it. And usually it's formulated more and more using natural language structure. The transition to using natural language in search is not an easy one, but it is made a lot easier by the fact that a lot of people now are using mobile, and there they use voice to actually carry out searches, which in itself is changing the way that they're conditioned to look for things and ask for things. So this transition now begins to also guide a little bit, or significantly rather, the way the content is created. In the past, we knew that content had to have specific aspects. You had to have specific keywords, which guided essentially the content creation strategy. It had to have specific length in the content that was being created. It had to have specific keyword density per item of content. It had to have a specific frequency in the number of times the content actually was being generated, and then it had to have specific depth or bulk in the content that was generated, so it constantly accumulated. These were the old blind signals of the past. You could take a website that was basically of almost negligible value in terms of what it showed to the person who would look for it in search, and optimize it to actually appear quite high. All you needed to do was be aware of the keywords, use the right specificity in terms of frequency, keyword density, content length, where keywords are placed in the content itself, and also how frequently you generated content and how many articles you had on your site. In that world, bigger always won. So if you're competing against a brand, for instance, you stood no chance because they always had bulk. If you're competing against a team that had deeper pockets, again you stood no chance because they would simply generate more content. If you're competing against somebody who knew a little bit about how to do keyword research and keyword density analysis, again, no matter how good your content was, you wouldn't surface in search because you wouldn't rank. And of course, all this happened without us going to the backlink creation economy, where essentially, in order to rank any website, you needed to have quite a high number of links pointing to that page with a specific age per link coming from specific domains with specific anchor text in the link itself, which would then also automatically and blindly push a website up in ranks. If all that sounds unfair to you, it's because it was, but it's exactly what it was. The moment you set up anything to work with mathematics, you immediately set up essentially a leaderboard, and the moment you have a leaderboard, you create a race of sorts, and you create an economy. So the first page on Google for specific keywords, for instance, meant something in terms of monetary value to webmasters, and they competed fiercely for it. And all this created an escalating arms race of sorts, which eventually led to almost the breaking of the web. How has all this changed now? Well, at a certain level it hasn't. Although there's no leaderboard, there's still mathematics governing semantic search. There's still algorithms governing the placement of websites in search. However, in order for any kind of shortcut to be created, you need to have a sense of gain for the effort that's involved. And that's exactly what happened in the past. If you had a certain amount of money, perhaps more manpower, a little bit more knowledge, you could create shortcuts to rank a website higher in search faster than it would organically. Whether it deserved it or not, right now we're not even examining it. But by gaining time, you gained money. Now, however, irrespective of whether a website deserves to rank in search or not, there is no shortcut. The factors which determine its ranking and visibility in search are so complicated and they take so much verification and time, there's actually no saving in time. There's no shortcut anymore. So essentially you're in a world where if you do the wrong thing, it takes as long as if you do the right thing, which means that without any kind of shortcut, you may as well do the right thing anyway, because having done the wrong thing, if you have managed to win, at some point you'll be found out, and it'll be all for nothing. The transition of the web from websites to people, which Google has frequently promoted, goes into the social signal of the semantic web. The social signal is generated by people and their activities, essentially us, mainly through social networks, primarily at the moment through Google+, which is entirely transparent to Google. And if you look at how the social signal is being used by search, what is happening at the moment is that each personal profile on the web, primarily in social networks, primarily in Google+, is being assessed and weighed against its domain authority, against its activity, against its engagement, and against its interest levels. Google is building something called an interest graph and a link graph, sorry, not a link graph, a comment graph, which essentially creates a sentiment count and authority score for each individual on the web, almost the same way that you accumulate this in your working life on a daily basis offline. If you think about your offline activity, well, it's intended always to do something very specific. What is intended to do? You project a particular image, especially when you're at work. You create relationships and alliances with a specific goal. You behave in a particular way, and everything you do is intended to build on what you're actually trying to achieve in terms of reputation, in terms of authority, in terms of influence. For the first time ever, we actually have the same nuanced and specific approach online. And this is the drastically different approach that the semantic web and semantic search actually generate. Suddenly, everything which you do is transparent, and it counts towards something. And if you don't realize that, if you try to act in a way which is perhaps not quite as straightforward as it could be, whether it's through spamming behavior or through fraudulent linking or anything like this, the net effect of that activity is that the authority which your website has and your reputation are going to evaporate. This will seriously affect the ability that you'll have to influence anything on search or to deliver any kind of social signal that has any kind of meaning. Again, these are things which are new in terms of how we see them, how we approach them, and they're constantly evolving and scaling, so their full impact has yet to be felt. Over the past year, I was involved in a number of experiments within Google+, where we used specific profiles on a one-off basis to see the impact that an authority profile would have on search. Now, in an ideal world, Google+ wouldn't have a significant impact on rankings, but at the moment it does, and it does that simply because the mechanism is there for semantic search to read these social signals, but it is not evolved sufficiently yet across the web to take into account all the different counterbalances which need to come into play. So at the moment, Google+ is your only real shortcut to gaining a little bit of influence in search through your social media activity. Has anybody got any questions up to this point?
Okay, so
everybody spellbound, but if anybody would like to ask any questions in the box, please do now, and we'll feed them through to David. One question that springs to my mind, David, is from what you're saying there. You're saying at the moment that the best thing that anybody could do at the moment to get some kind of influence within the semantic web is to really maximize the use of their G+ profiles and start using the comments there and linking to their own material. Is that right?
It is, yes, and I'm just looking at the questions now, and the question is actually spot on. Okay, how do we use Google+? Now, I must preface the fact that it's an advantage by also saying that it's a really difficult social network to actually become familiar with. The activity within Google+ is layered in plus mentions, when you actually mention somebody, engagement, when somebody engages with a post you have put there, reshares, and plus ones. Now, plus ones is the weakest signal you can have because it is very difficult to actually understand the intent of a plus one. And although Google aggregates them, they're not a very strong signal of anything just yet, unless of course you do accumulate, let's say on a post, 3,000 or 4,000 plus ones, in which case by sheer volume they begin to actually mean something. So just going for plus ones, which is in many ways the equivalent of Facebook likes, which we were familiar with in the past, doesn't actually get you anywhere. So what does get you somewhere? Well, first of all, you need to find your audience in Google+. Why? Because every profile has an interest graph which Google mines, which determines the interests and scope of activity of each person. So for instance, let's suppose that I'm selling second-hand cars, and I get online, I get on Google+, and I don't know, I become involved with a fishing community. Google knows it's a fishing community, it knows that people talk there, and although I may get them to engage with me, that engagement in terms of what I'm doing is actually a very weak signal which Google wouldn't really take on board. But suppose my second-hand car post now gets reshared in a car enthusiasts community, where every profile there has a very specific weight in terms of their interest in cars. And my post is so good that it gets talked about, it gets quite a number of lengthy responses and comments, and then gets reshared. Well, the reshares, which are strong engagement, and the comments, which deliver sentiment counts to Google, allow Google to determine the value of my post on Google+. And here's something about Google+, which you may not be aware of. Every post which you create there is essentially a web page. So if you create a post, you need to take almost the same care and attention in terms of heading, content, keywords as you would on a web page, because it is indexed and it will show up on search. And if it's a post that has been engaged with and interacted with at some length, then its value in terms of what it contains can be a lot higher than, let's say, an existing website. And there have been instances where people who have actually created profiles in Google+ and invested some time in creating the kind of network and relationships which add value to those profiles, have put posts up which rank higher than their own websites. And their websites have obviously a lot more depth and a lot greater age, and sometimes they have page rank of 4 and 5, and they still rank below that.
That's pretty amazing. So with this, just to sort of open this up a little bit more, within the actual setting up of someone's Google profile on their Google Plus page, do all of the fields that Google asks you to fill out have equal weight, or in your experience are some of the fields more important than others, like the sites you are working on and your description?
The more information you put there, the better it is. On the profile which you have, the panel which is about me, which allows you to put in content about yourself, has a significant weight, and also the link which you put there is a do follow link, because Google will actually pass juice onto that from that. And then the link fields which you're, or the links which you are expected to put in terms of work or websites you're associated with, they are also important because Google uses them to determine what you do on the web. So for instance, let's say, and we're going to touch upon authorship in a minute because this comes into it, but right now, let's say that you have a website, and your website, to go back to my example, I do sell used cars, and my posts are predominantly, but not always, about cars. Google sees that linkage and it begins to add authority on my website about second-hand cars, for instance. Sorry, not on my website, on my profile, about second-hand cars, which then allows me from my profile to share a page from a website, generate content, generate engagement, generate reactions, and suddenly that page on my website acquires a lot more weight and value than if I just placed it on my website and left it there. So here's a transition from websites to people. Essentially, Google is using the social layer, the people layer, to filter the value of content across the web. And also it's using it to understand the content better.
Okay. Does this have, from what you're saying, any kind of negative impact on, for example, affiliate marketers who
Yes.
may be working in multiple markets?
Yes, absolutely. Now, unfortunately, somebody always gets caught in the middle. Anybody involved in affiliate marketing or multi-level marketing suffers here, because it becomes very difficult for semantic search to understand the authority of the person. To its eyes, it looks like spamming activity. So affiliate marketing is, unfortunately, right now, facing a very dire problem. Already it's beginning to shrink a little bit, and certain affiliate marketers are seeing a drop in their income.
Okay, that's fine. So just to expand upon that now, Google really only want us as individuals to have one profile. Is there any way that you're aware of within the boundaries of Google's terms and conditions that people that work in 4 or 5 different markets can create other profiles, or is that an absolute no-no and we need to look at other solutions?
You need to find other solutions. If you have a lot of profiles which are linked right now, I mean, at some point they'll tell you, you can't have this, and you need to close one of these profiles or 2 of these profiles and actually come down to a real one. But at the moment, there are instances of people whom I know who simply had a company profile, or rather a personal profile for a company, which then closed down, but they kept it going for different reasons, and then they opened up another one, which is their personal profile, and now they happen to be at another job, and they have a 3rd profile. They're finding it really difficult to gain traction in terms of the weight that their profile carries, simply because all of the profiles are separate. Google actually can see that there are linkages there. It can track them, and it creates a question mark. The question mark is a soft question mark at the moment, so there are no penalties involved, but certainly the accumulated reputational value of your profile is a lot slower than it would have been otherwise. And in many ways, this mirrors the same thing in terms of offline behavior. I mean, if somebody knows you by the name of Mike, for instance, and the moment you step out of your neighborhood, you become John, and by the time you step into some sort of conference, everybody knows you as Nick. Well, whatever what you say may have great value, but there's a certain amount of questioning. And at the end of the day, reputation is essentially the willingness of someone to do business with you if they don't know you, if they don't know you personally. And that it's exactly the same equation online. The reputation which you gather on the web works in exactly the same way. The trust factor needs to work.
Definitely. Now there's just one more question before we get you to move on, and that's from Joseph. And that's, okay, I'm thinking the corporations with deep pockets will still remain in power when the full semantic web is in place. Will the semantic web change this?
In a word, yes, and I will explain to you why. And I see this firsthand. I advise multinationals who have in excess of 60,000 employees, and they're active in 14 to 15 different countries. Traditionally, they have always had things go their way simply because they could afford agencies who could create processes which then could be implemented, which would grind you down no matter what you did. You didn't have their manpower, you didn't have their pockets. And now we come into the personal web where everything is personalized and it works on trust. And trust for a corporation working like that is very difficult to generate. I would much rather take a recommendation of someone I know, and I'm not unique in this, than blindly follow a corporation that simply does things always and tells me something is great because that's how they've operated. We are seeing some of these changes now in advertising, which is becoming a lot more personable and softer. They're actually showing us a very human side to their advertising. And they do that because they realize that if we don't connect with them at the shared values, people-to-people level, their deep pockets actually work against them. But this goes deeper than that, because a lot of the activity which corporations did in the past, beyond the marketing aspect, also got them ranked high in search. And what semantic search now actually looks for is that post of real value. So suppose I'm a corporation with 30,000 people and a $10 million annual budget in advertising, and you're just a guy working from home doing something similar, but you have a real passion for it, and the content which you generate answers the questions that the consumers actually have. And the content that I generate as a corporation is slick advertising focusing on product features and prices and promotion. Well, your content will get indexed and surface higher than mine in search, despite the fact that I have such a big presence. And the only way that this will happen, of course, is if your content is discovered and then engaged with at a human level, the social network, talked about, shared, reshared, etc., which then Google uses as a signal of value to a specific audience. And then that allows you to rank higher. So that's the answer to your question. Already we see experimentation in Google search with long-form content, which appears in the middle of search, and sometimes they call it deep content, which means it doesn't come from a branded website. It may be an enthusiast website, but it has real value in terms of the content that is actually posted on the page.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks for that, David. So, having answered the questions that we've got there, what were you going to go on to after this part?
Okay, now as we talk about this, there's a couple of things to actually keep in mind. The first one is, where is search actually headed? Because that is the million-dollar question. Everything that the semantic web which we're experiencing right now is a transitory phase. And the question is, where is it going and why is it going there? Okay, and the second question, of course, is what do we need to do to actually position ourselves in that web in order to benefit the most from it? Now, these two questions are linked, and here's where search is actually headed. It's going away from ranking, because ranking now is meaningless. What is actually of value is the fact that a page contains the kind of content that a person asking a search query wants to see. It's also going away from the traditional first page of Google. That's disappearing. The first page of Google now is formulated in direct response to the search query, the searcher's history, his search profile, his search patterns and answers which have surfaced across the world to similar queries, his IP address, if he's on a computer, his location, if he's on a location-enabled device like a tablet or a mobile phone, his speed, if he's on a phone, if he's in a car, or if he's on foot, and essentially what other interests he has and what other data about himself he's allowed Google to see through his social network activity. All that forms the filter through which content actually surfaces. And because it does that, then the first page that people see is always different depending on the location, depending on the time of day, depending on the personal profiles, and it's pretty much different for everybody. So chasing that first page of Google ranking now is immaterial. It doesn't make any kind of sense. What do you need to chase? You need to chase answers to queries, which is totally different to keywords. In the past, we used to think, okay, in my industry sector, there are X number of keywords. These are the top contested keywords. These are the long tail keywords. And this is the content which I need to generate. And that allowed us in the past to formulate a content creation strategy which made sense. It doesn't work anymore. So what does work? Well, you need essentially to take a 180 degree shift. You need to go from what you're doing and look at what your activities and your business through the eyes and needs of your target audience. That target audience has very specific questions, and if you can create content which, as comprehensively as possible, answers those questions, then you get into the kind of content creation strategy which allows you to become an authority in a particular field. If you're an authority in your field, you're also going to get engagement, you're also going to get reshares, you're also going to get reputational value, you're also going to be ranked in terms of your particular content score, which means your website is going to become a trusted authority, which then the next logical step to that equation is at some point when there's a search query, your website, your content, your business will be the only correct answer to a particular search query. The 10 little blue links which we're familiar with now, which will have always been part of our search life, are going to go. We're going to get one answer. So this is where search is heading. It's also going to become invisible. We already have wearable devices, Google Glass is on the way, and we're getting into the stage where we are going to be, as consumers, we're going to be interacting with computers which have no keyboard and no screen. So the only point of contact, the only interface basically will be our eyes and our voice, particularly our voice. Already on Google Desktop, we have seen in the US and also in the UK that you can actually enable voice and command search through voice. This is a two-way street. As we experiment with that, Google also looks to see the kind of search queries which we input in the interface. And gradually they're changing to more and more natural language queries, which then enable the enrichment of the search index, which then gradually will start shifting everything towards semantic web. So if we're going from a web of statistical probable answers to a web of clear answers, then the question is, how do we make sure as businesses that we're part of it? Two things. First of all, you need to have a clear content creation strategy, which is not just writing. Why isn't it just writing? Because your audience isn't just readers anymore. When you have no screen in front of you, it's very difficult to be a reader. You can have podcasts, you can have audio files, you can have pictures, you can have video, you can have posts in social media, you can have interactions and engagements and real posts, original, unique content shared in social media verticals, as well as everything else which you do. And the question which I face most frequently when I say all this is, how are we going to do all this? We're not publishers and we're not photographers and we have no inspiration. And every time we get into a business, we are bogged down with everyday details. It's a fair answer, so it's a fair question. The answer to that is that basically what we are at is an evolution of the way business is being carried out. When you started out any brick and mortar business in the past, you didn't ask, oh, I now need to also, I don't know, become a cleaner because the floors need to be clean, or become a designer because I can't have just a tabletop with merchandise there. I actually need to merchandise it in a way that makes people want to buy it. We took those activities and those skills on board, and we did them as a matter of course, because we understand the nuanced approach of the offline world. We need now equally to take on board the nuanced approach of the online world. So essentially, all those activities which I just described have to be part of the mindset of running and promoting a business on the web today. And you need to start gradually, and you need to start off from your strengths. So if you, for instance, have a really good visual ability to take great pictures, create memes, perhaps do a podcast, start off from that. And then gradually expand your activities to include everything else. So that's the first thing that needs to happen. The second thing that needs to happen is that we need to have plurality. And by that I mean that it's not enough anymore to work solely from your website. It simply doesn't work. You need to be able to work from social media networks and create a real point of presence there. It actually generates value for your audience. And you need to use that activity to discover influencers, to discover a new audience, to discover people who can become evangelists, even if they're not your current customers, and they can help amplify your online presence. There are two ways of looking at the web that's developing. One is it's a huge challenge, which it is, and I take that fully on board. The flip side of the coin is it is full of opportunities. It needs a little bit of ingenuity and definitely that mind shift from the past to the future. And the moment we have that mind shift, we actually begin to see how things can actually happen. People who have shared values with you, they may live in Tahiti or Honolulu or on the other side of the moon. If they identify with you, they will promote you and share your content and become evangelists for your business, even if they have never done business with you, because they get to believe in what you do. And that is catalytic and it's transformative. We've never had anything like this before. This is the opportunity of what we used to call the small operator to be every bit as big and powerful, leveraging people power as any big corporation on the planet. I'll take questions at this point.
Okay, now you covered on this particular question from Roshan a little bit earlier. He's also a reader of your book, and he says, David talks about the relationship between citations and the knowledge graph. Surely the big corporations would have more citations and therefore more opportunities to show up in Google rather than the one-man business. Now, I think that's a great question. Is there any validity to that way of thinking?
Okay, that's a really good question, and again, the short answer is no. There is a maybe there. Let me explain this, because this is actually a very good question to bring up. But let's explain what citations are. Citations, suppose you're running XYZ Corporation. XYZ Corporation is a small business you run from your home, and you're facing, I don't know, at the other end, a massive monolithic conglomerate with deep pockets and huge manpower. And you produce content because you know you have to, because you know it's the only way to actually reach your audience. There you have a PR agency which actually bangs out press releases every single day. And you can't compete with that, because not only do they bang them out, and you put your content on your website and you socialize it through your social network and your connections. They bang them out and they go through, I don't know, 200 PR points. Citation is when your company name and your company website are referenced without a direct link. Google can actually see that. Now, if we take what I just described, it looks like an uneven fight, and also it looks like a fight you can't win. But actually you can, especially now. As of 3 months ago, press releases stopped having any value in terms of link power or citation in Google search, because Google found that they were potentially of low quality in terms of what they pointed to. So a press release now only has any kind of value if it is so well written and so great in content that it is discovered by other people, talked about, engaged with, and reshared. So essentially it becomes just like any other piece of content, which now gives you, the small operator working from home, the same power as a massive operator, spending a lot of money producing content and getting on the surface of it a lot more citations than you. It gives you a lot more power, because Google looks at the engagement of those citations. It looks to see where they're cropped up. It looks to see the context of the conversation. It looks to see the sentiment, was it positive or negative. And these things in the past didn't matter. If you had 100 negative citations in the past, were as good as 100 positive ones, because they gave you the same leverage in search. But now they don't. They can actually work against you. So that answers your question. There may be a small shift in the beginning, because search is still it's obviously algorithmically driven and it's relatively blind, but the moment it actually realizes what it is, then there's an adjustment.
That's brilliant. Tony's got quite an open-ended question in some respects. That's, how do you see video on mobile website helping?
Okay, the question of there's two questions there. So let's take the one about the mobile website. Obviously, having a mobile website is a must. At the SMX East conference in New York, where I was speaking about semantic search, Googlers there shared figures with us, which showed that we're exactly on the 50% point in terms of traffic to websites from mobile devices. So if you haven't got a mobile-friendly website, potentially you're losing 50% of your traffic, which is a huge shift, a huge proportion.
Yeah.
So having a mobile website, just having it, is a signal Google takes into account, because it shows that as a company or as a website, you're attuned enough to the needs of your audience to actually have a mobile website and present it to the visitor when they come. But now it looks at additional factors. And one of the things which Google weighed on after a lengthy debate last year was whether to have a separate mobile website or to have a responsive design. And they came down on the side of responsive design. And responsive design, for those who are not fully aware of it, is when you have a website that is resizable to show up correctly on any kind of screen or any kind of device. Now, within that context, not every website on the planet is suitable for responsive design, simply because it may serve your mobile audience better to show them different kind of content on a mobile device than to show them on the web or on a big screen. And there could be many reasons for that. I think the RSPCA is using a very good example of that in terms of having mobile content which comes up specifically for mobile devices. But essentially, whichever road you go down on, there are two things you need to worry about. The first one, which is critical, is loading speed. Again, at the SMX East in New York, Google said that 75% of websites which have mobile devices, websites, or have responsive design for mobile websites, fail the speed loading test for mobile devices. The speed loading test is that your site has to load within half a second. And if it doesn't, Google has figures that the abandonment rate is quite high. So basically you need to optimize your website to show up fast on mobile devices. And the second thing is you need to make sure the content you have there is of real value. Because if you have a high bounce rate from mobile sites or from mobile visitors, then that works against you. Google sees that. Does that answer your question?
I think that answers it really, really well. Thank you. Now, there's another question there which I think is quite important, and I was going to ask that as well, and that's from Joseph. When do you think all of the semantic web changes will materialize, and will it be in phases?
Okay, it will definitely be in phases. I spent quite some time in New York talking to Dwayne Forrester, who is the product manager for Bing. And he's a great guy to talk to. But essentially what I was doing is I was looking at the problems they face, facing in the semantic web. And he said something very revealing to me. He said search engines essentially follow the people. And most of the people on the web are interested in entertainment, sports, and light-hearted stuff, as opposed to deep knowledge stuff for businesses. Which means that content which addresses those needs is going to first enter the semantic web, and we have seen this. You know, if you're asking sports questions, for instance, you usually get very good semantic answers. If you're asking deeper information about celebrities, for instance, again, because there's so much interest, you tend to get right answers. If you ask, you know, what's the best business in my area to buy, I don't know, a hammer from? Well, Google doesn't know, which is ridiculous, because it should. It doesn't, because populating the semantic index at that depth is a slow process, which will happen, but it doesn't happen very quickly. Now the question is, how quickly will this happen? Well, it is happening a lot faster than I had hoped, and a lot of many industry analysts had expected. Certainly last year, about 3/4 through the year, Google announced that the semantic index had grown by 50% in number of entities, which is a tremendous leap in terms of content. And entities, just to clarify it for everybody, is Google's understanding of words, not as words, but as things, as people, as buildings, as countries, etc., with all that that implies. Now, why is this important? Because if you get an entity into the index, that entity accelerates the process. And let me explain this so everybody gets a clear idea of how it works. Suppose, for instance, that I, as David Amerland, become an entity in the Google index. The moment I'm an entity, it knows I am speaker, analyst, author, writer, associated with several corporate businesses, have my own website, and these are my fields of expertise. This is the areas where I live in and have lived in, etc., etc., etc. So it has a very clear idea about these things. It's not guessing anymore. Which means then that when I say, for instance, that Nick Jones, who sells used cars, is a great person to do business with, Google accepts that a lot faster than it would have if it was also trying to find out exactly what my authority and my expertise, etc. is, which then allows Google to index and create entity graphs around that person. So essentially every entity point becomes a point of acceleration for Google's knowledge graph and a semantic index. And to have increased the size by 50% so quickly, it means it's accelerating a lot faster than we thought, which means that by the end of this year, we'll be in an entirely different world in terms of semantic search.
That's something I'm actually looking forward to. Now, I've actually got a question here. You were talking just now about the importance of social media networks and utilising the power of those networks to find people with your shared values. Can you use too many social networks, or they're all out there, utilise all of them? Is there any sort of stats or figures?
There is no negative side to using a lot, let's put it this way. However, obviously from a human point of view, you can't do everything well everywhere. You need to make some choices, and you need to find, in the first instance, the social networks of your audience is. In plain speak, you need to fish where the fish are. So if, for instance, you're a Facebook person, Facebook is working great for you. Facebook is not really transparent to Google search right now. Experiments we carried out last year showed that Facebook social signals are non-existent, which means that they will not help you in search. But if you're getting traffic from Facebook, that is a ranking signal. Definitely use it. If you're good at networking there and marketing from there, there's no reason to stop. But obviously you should look at expanding into Twitter, LinkedIn perhaps, depending on what you're doing. Certainly G+. G+ is going to be the one clear advantage which you will have for some time.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, I think that's all of the current questions answered, David. We're getting close to an hour now. Is there sort of any last bits that you wanted to sort of bring up or cover?
Definitely. Okay. So we're getting to the final stage now. Well, we're looking at semantic search and saying, okay, great. I haven't gotten, the obstacle which everybody, and absolutely everybody is facing, is time. There's not enough time to actually invest in creating quality content and socializing correctly across the web. And this includes large corporations, funnily enough. I know they have more manpower than you think they have, and they do, but it's never enough. They're always short-staffed because people are expensive. So essentially they're always operating with the same constraints as you are. And this is the big shift in the semantic web. Size really does not matter. I know it appears to matter. Yes, they have access to advertising. Yes, they have manpower. Yes, they have bigger budgets. And yes, they have a presence in a lot more countries. But if you take that on the web, the fight between David and Goliath now is equal. You both have the same power. All you have to do is be clever with what you have. Be inventive with what you have. Be creative within your own, the fullest sense of your own ability. And that is the winning mindset that will enable you to take full advantage of semantic search. This is the one takeaway that you need to take with you from reading my book and completing the course which you're completing. It will show you a lot of practical things that you'll do. 4 or 5 years from now, some of those things will have changed drastically, some will have changed tangentially. What will not have changed is the need for this mindset to actually allow you to use to the fullest sense of your ability the opportunities that you have. And that's what you need to bear in mind.
That's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Now, I know that from my personal experience that you've got your own course on, I think it's a free course, isn't it, David, that you're letting people sort of...
There's two courses available. One is a free course which we have on Google+. It's actually through a colleague's website, which is called plusyourbusiness.com. And the course there is based very closely on my book. And essentially, it's just another additional layer of clarification. And it was created specifically to address some of the questions which arose in context as my book was being discussed. There's another course which I have put together at udemy.com, so that's udemy.com, and that is being populated constantly by me. That's a paid course.
Okay, the members here can get access to that through your website, which is davidamerland.com.
Yes,
certainly.
certainly.
Okay, now there's one last question from Tony relating to Yandex. The question is, what is you in Russia? Now, Tony, very quickly, is that
Yandex, yes.
Yeah. Now, Yandex, our members know they've broke the mold with the search engines, and they've recently told the world that within Moscow they're going to do away with backlinks as a ranking signal.
Yes, they did that, but they never really adequately explained or how they're going to do that. And certainly they said they would do it with commercial sites, but not with informational sites, which seems to be a contradictory term, because an informational query can turn you into a commercial one. So certainly the ability to do away with backlinks is brilliant, but I don't think that in this particular case they have addressed it correctly or even explained it adequately. Certainly I would love to see Google do away with this entirely. It would stop all this gaming nonsense. From what they discussed with me in New York, they have no immediate plans of doing away with that, and certainly everything they've put in place since the Penguin and Panda updates has been with an intent to clear out and empower even more the existing link graph they have in place. So from our point of view, I don't think we're going to see links going away at any point in time soon. And the unfortunate ramification of this is that right now we're also in a world of negative SEO, where, you know, if I wanted to burn any of your websites, all I have to do is get somebody to create all these backlinks from a black part of the web, and you would actually be affected even though you have done nothing wrong. Yeah. And although Google says, you know, this doesn't work very well, it actually works very well at the moment, I'm afraid. So you need to be vigilant about this.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Thanks, David. Now, just as a final comment before we wrap up, if you've got your crystal ball in your hand and you're rubbing it and you're seeing through the semantic ether, this year, in the next 6 months, what do you think is going to be the next big change that Google are probably going to announce or implement?
Well, we're going to see, for sure, two things. First of all, we're going to see an increase in entities, and we're going to see a change in the way that the results appear on Google search, even on desktop search. And what you will notice is that the first 3 to 4 answers will have a greater, that you get in the 10 little blue links, have greater contextual value and accuracy than before. But the moment you go below those, anything goes, simply because Google now is filling in the existing, the places which come after the first 4 with relative nonsense, really. And that's, it's not by design, it's the unfortunate side effect of mixing semantic search, which gives you very limited answers, but of high confidence, with Boolean search, which fills in things statistically. And the moment you get that mix, immediately you get this effect. I was looking at a paper, an academic paper published just last year on exactly that kind of effect carried out by Stanford Center of Artificial Intelligence, where they were looking at machine learning in closed data sets. And the moment they mixed the two, hoping that they would actually get better search results, they got the exact opposite. They got an improvement in the first 2 to 3 positions, and then everything else degraded. And we're going to see more of that. And the other thing which you will see, certainly, is the impact of the social web in terms of serendipity search, and if I can very quickly explain this because it's an important factor.
Yeah, please carry on.
The the element of serendipitous discovery in search is critical. It's there to help you find things which you didn't know you were looking for, but they're contextually important to what you're actually looking for. And sometimes you don't even know that you're looking for those things. And it is also there from a Google point of view to help break the search bubble, which is created by context and personalization, and broaden the search horizon. Now, ironically enough, you need to create a program for this, and the program uses social signals. So the more socially active you are, and all of us inevitably begin to become more and more socially active, the greater are the opportunities for serendipitous discovery. And from a business point of view, what do you have to do? Well, this is what you have to do. You may be, for instance, based only in Croydon, working with a 2-mile area from your place of business, and you're thinking, well, you know what, do I need the Great Wide Web for that? Well, because the Great Wide Web will allow you to create the connections, which could be people living in North America, Alaska, or the other side of the world in Sydney, who have a good social presence, who like what you do because you have shared values, you have connected with people, they like the stuff that you actually sell, which helps promote it online, which then becomes a suggestion on someone who does a search within your 2-mile radius, who wouldn't have found you otherwise. And there you go. That's a serendipity that comes up. So that requires an expanding social presence. And we're going to see more and more of that.
That's brilliant, David. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been really, really interesting. All those of you that
I'm thrilled to be here. It was really good questions. I really enjoyed it.
Maybe you'd like to come back again in a month or so and sort of talk
certainly,
more.
certainly.
That'd be great.
Love that.
Russ, Sue, is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap this up?
Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd like to encourage everybody to purchase a copy of David's book. Specifically in regards to this course, pretty much going to be required reading is Google Semantic Search, although Kevin will break things down for you, and obviously you have this webinar and other ones to come. Also be aware that there's other books I'm in the middle of, Social Media Mind, getting #1 on Google I have not read yet, so I can't recommend, but I'll be looking at it. And just be advised that the Google Semantic Search really you're going to want to look over. And of course there's other training and free training. We'll actually start pointing to more of David's stuff inside the members area. As far as future presentations are concerned, we're definitely going to try to get David back, and we're going to have some more questions in advance for you this next time, David.
Okay, thank you very much. And guys, if you want my book, it's available on Amazon or pretty much any bookshop. If they haven't got it, they can order it. So
yeah, we'll put actually a link in the members area so we get you an inside pitch there.
Superb. Thank you very much. Thank you for the kind words.
All right. Thank you.
It's a really good book. Thoroughly recommended. Thanks again, David.
Thank you, guys. Really enjoyed
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Awesome.
Okay.
Folks, we'll see you in the next webinar. Thanks again to David, and those of you that are here, if you just want to put ones up as a way of thanking David, that would be superb.
Yes, actually, for those of you, let's go ahead and get a little audience involvement. For those of you who learned something about the semantic web that was unexpected today and exciting, give me a 1.
Oh, wow. I'm thrilled. I really am.
Okay, good.
I'm definitely coming back to this audience.
Yeah,
That's great.
And I know that some of you were really scared. I mean, I've talked to a few of my friends who, well, Tony, you're really that's awesome. Tony's really excited about it. Some of you were scared in the past. I'm hoping that you can pick up on a lot of the inspirational things that Sue and I have been saying for about a year, but that David has done with far more rigor. That essentially we are entering into this Goliath versus, David and Goliath phase, where if you know what you're doing and you're working smarter, quite literally the old cliche, smarter, not bulkier, or not more links, no link spamming, this and that. This is why, Jimmy and Sue and I have been talking so much about negative SEO. One of Jimmy's biggest processes is he could work full time just undoing negative SEO, and we've had clients with that. So this is what we're really talking about, and I'm really, really excited about it. and I can't wait to have you back.
Guys, that'd be great. And I think certainly there's a lot more to cover on all this, but for the future webinar, if you come with very concrete problems which you're facing, and it doesn't matter how simple they may be, I will gladly address them in a very specific way.
Okay. And I have a future fantasy of actually getting you a person at one of our live events, which could be anywhere between 30 and 50 people. So we'll have more conversations outside of this on that.
Okay.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much from the Network Empire and the Semantic Revolution team. And we look forward to seeing you guys. We'll actually have this as a replay in the semanticwebtraining.com members area. And we'll let you know as soon as it's up. Thank you so much, folks. And we'll see you on the inside.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
The organizer has ended the session, and this call will be disconnected. Goodbye.